Welcome back to another episode of Deckology, where in this episode I am interviewing my good friend Skyler. He cuts up decks of cards and not in the way that I'm used to. He goes into detail about where he gets his inspiration from, how he thought of putting lights and mirrors and different cards together, and he goes over the whole process. It's fascinating. It's fascinating specifically because I didn't know how many razors you go through. And I didn't even realize that there was types of grips that you would have with cutting up decks. I'm not kidding, we get into the pretty nitty gritty and I start geeking out about it towards the end. So I throw up a couple of cards at him and I'm like, how would you cut this up? And then I realized that could be its own episode. It is fascinating seeing how this guy looks at a deck of cards, and it is just in a completely different way than I'm used to. Anyways, have a splendid week. Enjoy the episode, and I will see you guys in the next episode of Deckology. Enjoy.
So Cardistry Con 2022. This was right when I was getting back into collecting and get back into playing cards after many years of sort of just falling out of it. I loved it when I was a kid, loved Magic, but then, life happens, the college happens, but kind of pretty recently rediscovered this love for playing cards when I started doing kids Magic shows recently at music festivals. So that's where all this started, was just last summer at up in Oregon at a festival when I got that gig doing kids Magic. And then I got back into collecting, heard about Cardistry Con. I didn't even know Cardistry was a thing at all. I did not know it existed. But then started to discover, wow, there's these young people doing really cool things with playing cards that I've never seen
Real
before.
stuff, dude.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I know that for there's two camps of people when it comes to cardistry. Some people very much pro and some people very much against. But to me, cardistry is the future of playing cards. It's so cool and so impressive what's being done, and the creativity is just being taken to new and new and new levels with every new video that comes out. It's just
Dude,
wild. Yeah.
isn't it? It's like, what's fascinating to me about it is how often people just can come up with moves. I still have not been able to wrap my head around the fact that, like, I've watched Nate Lex do it live, like where he's just like messing with cards and he's like, oh wait, I could probably do it like this, and then all of a sudden he's doing something where I've like, but that's like, there's so many people that can do that, and I haven't been able to wrap my head around it. That's
Right. Well, there aren't. I mean, we are lucky that we're in this community of people that are all so great. But it's also important to remember that these people that we see do it represent a very small portion of very talented cardists. So
that's
I
the
don't know,
truth, dude.
it
That's
might be a
yeah.
sample bias for us,
They,
to be honest.
you're right. You're right. You're right.
But
It's but then there's like so many avenues with cards. So with
right.
with the future of playing cards, because like I feel like I don't see, unless I don't see a lot of cards being played with outside of this community. I don't like I think about like when I go to friends' houses or everybody's like, I don't hear people say like, we were playing this card game or I was
Right,
playing
right.
poker, but like that it is like its own community though too. I feel like, so I'm just ignorant to it, but I just also feel like I don't hear my friends talking about cards at all.
Right.
Like
And then
in real.
you try to talk to them about cards, they're like, yeah, okay. Like, yeah, tell me more about a deck of playing cards, buddy. Like,
So the paper's different.
right?
And you're like, no, it is, but it's like you
So can you
you just
make
have to
more
be there.
money because you're better at poker with that paper, or what's the point?
Yes. So what do
Uh,
you do with it?
yeah.
Well, I flick it, I throw cards, I drop cards.
You know what? That's a perfect segue back into the Cardistry Con. Is what do you do with it? Because I went to Cardistry Con with a mission for that question, actually. So
Mm,
so to bring it back around, so I started collecting and then I discovered the deck cutting just from a random Reddit post, and I decided to make one. I've actually got the first one I ever made right here. It's on my desk at all times. Was this tally ho? I added the lights later, but
yeah.
that was the first one I ever made, and I reimagined this design for the recent run I did for X Decks. But I posted that, and the thing started trending again. If you go on r/slash playing cards now, there's tons of deck cut posts, and there weren't for years before I kind of rediscovered it. Not to give myself too much credit or anything here, but
Yeah.
then I showed it to my dad, And my dad, I love him. I want to preface this by saying I have a great relationship with you, Dad. If you're probably gonna watch this, and I love you, and been a great. Yeah, I admire so much about my dad. But there are
Shout out,
times
Dad.
when there are times, as I'm sure many 30-ish-year-old males can relate to this, when my dad just isn't the best at being encouraging. You know, he loves me and he wants the best. But anyway, so I showed him my cuts, right? One of these and um one of the standard ones, and he goes, "Okay, that's beautiful, it's awesome, but what do you do with it?" So that's the segue, right? What do you do with it? So I went to CartridgeCon with this mission of like, what do you do with it? I mean, it's an art piece. You look at it, of course, but so I started asking different cartists and different people, what could I do with this that would make it something more usable, or what can you actually do with this? And so that's when I brought a few of my cuts and started showing them to people. And that's when you and I met, when I was going around showing them, and you had your camera and you started like, man, let me get a shot of those. Those are so
Dude,
cool.
yes, it's
And
unreal. Like being able to have documented the moment you meet a friend, mind
right.
blowing. What blew my mind was the lights. Like first off, it was really cool seeing it, but then you introduced the lights to it. Is that something that like you came up with, or is that something that like deck the deck cutters of America or whatever? If there's the subreddit,
Guild,
how about that? The
right.
deck cutting subreddit.
Yeah, we've actually
Is
got
that
a union, if you want to join. No, there was one other person I saw do it before. He's King of Cuts on Instagram. I think I don't remember if it's in underscores or dots, but
okay?
Jeremy, I think Hamby or Haramby is his name, and he's just phenomenal. He's him and since we're talking about some of the people that inspired me early, also
Yeah,
Rich, who goes by Intracuts, INTRI. They are two of the most. I mean, there are others as well. I mean, I could name like five or six.
right.
David, there are others as well who have inspired me, but uh, they were some of the ones who were really helpful to helping me out with the techniques early on, and I still look up to their work now. And Jeremy, King of Cuts, was the first one I saw to do lights, but I haven't seen anybody else do mirrors, and that also came about at CardistryCon actually. So it all loops back. I feel like this podcast is going to keep looping back to the CardistryCon.
Love it, dude. Love
Yeah,
it.
because on that mission of like what do I do with it, there were a few ideas that were proposed, and actually one of the projects I'm working on right now is a hand cut resin trainer project, which I'm not ready to show yet, but I'm almost done with the prototyping, and I'm going to post about it real soon. I also have to find someone to do some good cardistry with it because I'm not talented enough to showcase the product. Luckily I live in LA, so that shouldn't be a problem. But I was talking to Noel Heath, who's one of my heroes in cardistry. I think he's like when it comes to creativity, he's a mile above the rest. He's the Beatles when it comes to cardistry, in my opinion. There's no one that compares. So huge shout out to him. And it was actually after the 5K run. We were getting food, and I was talking to him about the idea, and he was the one that came up with the idea of putting the mirrors inside. He said, if you just put a two-way mirror in front and you play with the lights and put a mirror in the back and blah blah blah, and it worked. I was like amazed at how well it worked. We're gonna just insert some B-roll of some of
Oh
these
yeah.
here rather than trying
Yeah,
to show them on the
yeah. If
camera.
you're if
But
you're listening, check out the YouTube video.
right. But yeah, it was actually his idea originally, and then I of course had to play with it and prototype it, but I've got it pretty down now, and even to the point where my original ones were made with acrylic mirrors, but my newer ones I've sourced some glass mirrors. And I'm keeping to
That's
on
cool.
improving the product. So that was kind of how I came about to the projects that I'm working on now, which are the infinity mirror cuts and the hand cut resin trainers. Yeah.
The Heath mirror backed one, dude. The
Right. I don't have
like
any of those
that
here, but
one,
yeah.
yeah, I'll throw a picture of it up, but that one's that tripped me up. I was like, but
That
that's
makes
cool that he came.
sense.
So you guys were talking. You met after the 5K run, which was the 5K run, and
It's so fun. Yeah.
yeah. um, so you just met up after that, and then just started. Did you have all of your decks with you? That was like
Not on the 5K. We had been talking already throughout the weekend.
okay,
I started. He was one of the first people I approached, and I got him to sign my heat backs, and then we just started kind of talking from there, and he really liked my cuts as well. So at that point, we were just kind of just talking and hanging out.
That's
I don't
cool.
know, brainstorming ideas, I guess. Yeah.
It's it's like such a it's fun seeing like how like you can take what am I trying to say? So like the way that like so deck cutting existed. So like cards exist. It's like the evolution that's like spawning on me. So like originally here's cards, you play games with them, and then people are like, oh, I can do magic tricks with them, and then somebody's like, oh, I can start doing like cool shuffling and stuff like that with them. And somebody was like, oh, I'm gonna cut them. And then somebody was like, I'm gonna cut them to be like 3D looking. And then somebody was like, I'm gonna throw in a lights, and then somebody throws in a mirror. Like the evolution of the cards are just it's
And
mind blowing.
like what's going to come next? I've actually been working in talks with a leather guy of developing some kind of leather bookcase as well. So like it might even be like the next and the next and the next to whatever comes,
That's so cool. One of the so like when you're cutting, so you sold on X decks like a kind of a batch of decks that you
Yeah.
had cut.
Well, like, so here's what I do. I'll show you basically. Because I'm kind of doing it right now. I'm cutting some dab smilas, which I'm going to be turning into hand cut resin trainers. And that was actually another one of my favorites to cut was the dabs polka one. Just opening and cutting a polka, like a rare deck like that. That's
That one,
a privilege. Yeah, that was honorable mention for that one in my favorites for sure.
yes, dude.
But if I'm cutting four or five of the same design, I cut one card four times right next to each other, all right here on my map, the same cut. And then I go back and I do the same cut on all four cards. So rather than cutting one full card out, let me like if you look at something that's intricate like this, there are so many cuts on that
Yes, there are.
individual cuts. It'd be like one, two, three, four, five, blah, 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 right? So I cut out like maybe just this flower, and then you go to the next card, and I cut out just that flower. Go to the next card, cut out just that flower. Go to the next card, cut out just that flower. Peel all the cuts. I mean, there's more to the process. I go out over
Oh
every cut
yeah.
with my ball stylus to heal them, and then I go and apply pressure on the edges to make it look more natural.
Oh, of
But yeah,
course.
so that's
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
mean
Yeah.
by increasing the productivity. Is I can just go through and go one, two, three, four. Okay, next cut. One, two, three, four. It doesn't
Nice.
make it that much faster,
Mm-hmm.
but it's faster. You know,
That's, I mean, but like when you think about when you're doing it that much, though, that those little things just that has to add up.
it does. It
Um,
does.
that's so. What made you think of combining? So how did we can get back to the more process stuff later, but I want to know now. How do you think of like the two? So like when you showed me the polkas and the dabs together, my brain wouldn't even like think of putting those two decks together in the first place. But then to be able to cut them in a way that creates that kind of that, and then the lights, oh, dude, it was my favorite. Like of the batch that you showed me, I was like, that's the one. How do you come up with like, oh, these two cards would be really cool? Is that
Right, right. No, that is it's an interesting question, and I'm I'll give an answer, but the real answer is I don't really know. I just sort of look at the
you
decks,
know?
and it's just maybe just like oh, those would look well good together as a composition. But what it comes, I mean, there are a few elements that I look for in decks specifically. I look for not a ton of colors, but high contrast and bold lines. So that always helps if you have really bold lines. And then elements that aren't floating, like on the Dabs deck, some of the flowers are actually not attached to anything else and they're floating, and that makes it very difficult to turn that into an element. It's much easier when they're attached to the edge because then you can keep the that holding in place. So there are limitations that think make a deck not good for cutting, and there are design elements that I prefer for cutting. It's
Okay,
big bold
okay,
lines. Yeah, and
okay.
then
So it's
combining them, it's also like I have just like way too much knowledge on the decks that are out there. Like I do way too much research and looking at Kickstarters and blah blah blah. So my brain is always thinking of all these decks anyways, and so when I see a deck, I'm like, my brain goes through like, what would that? It's like when you're making a video and your brain starts going through all the different music that you know,
yeah.
and you're like, oh, that would be perfect. You know, it's the same thing. My brain starts going through all the different decks that I know, and then a lot of times I cut things and they actually don't look good, and I toss them. Let me give me 1 second. I'm gonna show you how.
Yeah.
I'm gonna show you my seconds, my ones that didn't make the cut. So you can see how many. 1 second.
Oh, of course, there's times where you start it and you're like, wait, this is not going to work out. Does that happen? I guess you're about to tell me. Yeah.
Happens a good amount. This was my seconds from like the X Decks one. So like we have like some. Actually, this one wasn't. This is from a different one. That like just the cuts weren't perfect. Some that I decided to go a different direction with it. But I've got so many seconds here. It's dozens of them that I've just. These are all cut cards that I decided not to include for some reason or another because they didn't look good or they weren't perfect enough or whatever. So it's a huge amount of trying and going, no. Oh, that's it. Yes, you know?
Right. Though. I mean, the ones that you've like put out, at least the batch through XX, like I'm thinking about it, but like every single one just hits. So it is like
Thanks,
through
dude.
trial and error. So it is that's fascinating. So you kind of have like a different perspective when you're looking at a deck. You're noticing different kinds of things like
Right, right.
imperfections and on a very like micro scale.
Exactly. And that's right. That's why I pulled up this deck. We went on a little side tangent. So on the Art of Play Curious Wonders deck, it'll be better to probably get a good B-roll shot of this here. But if you
Oh
look
yeah.
closely enough, these little blue triangles are supposed to end at the gold line. And there are times when they go over like half a millimeter. Just the slightest bit. Something you would never in a never ever notice unless you were cutting it with an exacto knife to that
Right.
precision. You know what I mean?
For
And I'm like,
hours.
oh wow, look at that. So now my cut has a little bit of that light blue in it. And I just wanted the dark blue, you know? And that's how you come to notice those little imperfections. Like,
That's
and not that that's
fascinating.
any big deal. I mean, these were printed,
Right.
I think, by Legends, and Legends usually does a great job, but and they did as well on this one. But you know, it's just these micro imperfections that are totally different from the big off-center printing that we
Yeah, man.
notice, you know, that are probably present in 99% of decks. You know, like how would you notice on a back design this complicated? How would you notice a micro
No.
imperfection like that? You wouldn't. You
Right.
couldn't, unless you were the person who made the artwork. That person would notice. But
Yeah,
yeah.
the time you spent hunched over, just man, that. So, do you find that relaxing, or do you find it like kind of like, how do you feel when you're doing it?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it, you know,
Yeah,
because I, yeah, it's too much. It's too much hard work. I mean, I have to have nothing. I mean, this is way too boring to get into the podcast, but I have a whole routine of ice packs and wrist exercises and stuff
of
because it's
course.
really,
Yeah,
really difficult, and I limit
yeah.
myself to how much I can do per day, blah blah blah. So,
No, that's
but
fascinating. Yeah,
it's
that you have
crazy
to take
how
care of your hand. Yeah, because it's
right.
didn't even think
Because
of that.
like the blade, a number 11 blade, which I'll pull up here. I have this really nice handle, but it's just a standard number 11 Exacto blade. And that's not really meant to cut through cardboard or cardstock, you know, it's meant to cut through paper. So it's a lot of pressure on the wrist, basically. Um,
Didn't even think of
what the heck were we just talking about? Oh, how I feel when I'm doing it. Yeah, but as long as I stay on top of that and I limit myself, it doesn't really cause me too much physical pain. It's amazing how all other hobbies and things have just fallen by the wayside. I was right in the middle of like all these other things that I was loving doing, and I haven't even had any interest in anything other than cutting cards since I started doing this. It's all that I want to do when I have a free time during the day. I have a half hour between, you know, like lunch and whenever I'm doing the next. I'm like, I could probably cut one card right now. Like it's just I'm
that. That's
loving it.
so
Yeah.
cool, man. That's
Brainstorming the designs is in itself a lot of time spent, you know, to sit there and think of when I
of
look at the
course.
dabs deck, there's so many flowers. Like which ones do I keep? Which ones do I connect to the others? Which ones do I get rid of, you know? Yeah. So I definitely do a lot of brainstorming on that.
That's the brainstorming, but then like the process of doing it though. So the ice, like needing to ice your hand. So I can only relate to this because when I was learning mantra, um, I would practice for so long, and um, my hand would just like at the end of the day, I would have muscles like in the weirdest spots on my like behind my pink, like just muscles that I'm using that I just couldn't, like, I had to stop practicing because I would go all day with it. And then so you have the same kind of thing that happen when you're cutting like going
Definitely.
through a detailed deck.
And then I'm sure that you probably developed a similar thing like I do, where I go, okay, I can actually cut about 2 hours per day, especially if I take breaks in between. I can practice mantra 2 to 3 hours per day, but if I do any more than that, then my hand hurts tomorrow and I can't practice tomorrow. So it's
Right,
better to just
dude.
limit each day, It's like
Of
because the
course,
muscles
yeah.
do build up over time. You
Yeah.
practice 2 hours, and then after a couple weeks, you can practice 3 hours, and blah blah blah. So
That's
that
I
helps.
didn't
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that fact that, like, of course I've got an iPad Pro, and so I'll like journal down a lot. I like take notes and brainstorm on it. But I notice after I'm writing for a while, my hand starts getting sore, and like what you just described is like doing that on steroids, because you're just like having to actually push down and
Right.
cut through something. That's Yeah, I didn't even think about like the physical aspect to cutting them. That's
That's why, like, I'm always working on improving my cuts, as intricate as they are, and as I mean, I look at them and I'm like, these are good, but there are some people, if people are interested in this art form, there's some people that do card what's the word I'm looking for? Trading card game cuts,
Oh, okay.
not playing cards.
Like
Yeah, Pokemon,
Pokemon.
Yu-Gi-Oh, blah
Okay,
blah blah.
okay.
Yeah, all that stuff. And the level of intricacy and precision that some of these people are accomplishing, I'm thinking of Mr. Shadowbox and Sunforge Cards are two people who
Okay.
inspire me to incredible lengths to continue to push the technique because I see what's possible and it's unbelievable. There's still so much more
Okay.
possible. Like I still feel like I have so far to go on my technique of the actual cuts themselves. That
Interesting. You know what you want to improve on. What's something like when you see somebody's art like Mr. Shadowbot, you're like, wow, I have so much, like the precision he has, all this. What's something that like you're currently working on or like hope to achieve? Because I can't think like so like I right now, here's like the best example I can do. I see people do retrigger and they can do it with ease, and they can like separate packets super quick multiple times in a row. You're seeing kind of something similar then with what Mr. Shadowbox is doing with Pokemon cards. What
right,
about it like interest you with his like technique?
right. Well, there are a few things. I mean, first and foremost, just how clean the cuts are. That
Okay,
it
okay,
it looks as if the cuts aren't there at all. And I mean, I know to the average, to most eyes when they look at this, they don't see the imperfections. But if you really
interesting.
get close to those snakes, it's there. I mean, there really are. I mean, at least I see them. A lot of
That's nuts,
imperfections
dude. See,
around
I
the
wouldn't have.
edges.
I can't even.
Little white spots where you can see the angle wasn't quite right on the cut,
Interesting.
and this is actually one of my older ones. Like some of my newer ones, for instance, this one I just did recently. I'm pretty proud of the cuts. Actually, I think they're
It's like
pretty
a
darn
portrait,
clean.
dude.
But
That's
this one, oh, we can get. It's got blue and red
of
LEDs inside,
course,
two different
dude.
colors, right? Yeah.
I
I'm
love that
actually
one.
I'm actually hoping to. I made a mirror one as well. I'm hoping to approach Chris Brown with these at some point. That's why
Oh
I actually
man,
these ones you also probably won't see on my Instagram for a while until after I've had a chance to approach him.
dude,
But
that's those were you were just held up the you just held up three decks. One was which orbits did you the Mac
yeah, it's
lethal?
the Mac Lethal orbits. Yeah, both of these are
Okay,
the Mac Lethal orbits. I just put this one in the Fulton's Chinatown tuck case.
that's what was different about it. Okay,
Yeah, because I like the
nice.
way the orange played off with the red and the blue. Yeah.
Love that,
Also,
dude.
also like, I used the tuck case for this one, so then I wanted to make another one, so I
That
used that tuck
is,
case.
and so like you, the high standards that we hold for ourselves is what's interesting. Is like I'll see like so I see that the Fontaine one that you showed earlier that you're like the cuts just aren't like perfect, but I see that and I'm like, what?
Right,
Literally, I'm just
right,
like
right.
I don't see what you're looking at, and so I guess what I'm because I see it, I'm like that's detailed, But like, so it is interesting. Like, I'll catch myself doing that with cardistry. Like, I'll see like, but they were able to do that rev cut really smooth. Like, what's the buttery or something, like when somebody's like their flow is really good with cardistry.
Right.
Yang the bunny on Instagram is an example of it. Mosh pit meditation, people that just can like flow really well. I see that and
Right.
I'm like, that's how I feel like I want to like aspire to get like
I
that
think
level of flow. So you have like that same
Lars
kind of
is my
detail.
Lars is my
Mm.
primary example for flow. He's uh
Art.
Lars Mayran. Yeah.
Yep.
Um yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's also a level of intricacy. And to be fair, like if I can only put so many hours into each one of these, because they can only command a certain price. Whereas
Right.
I know that people like Mr. Shadowbox and such, people are willing. Let me put it like this: I aspire to some point, someday, get to the point where I have a large enough and dedicated enough audience where they will pay me the amount of time it would take to make something like what Mr. Shadowbox makes. That's part of it as
Nice.
well. Is that
Okay.
like he's putting weeks into these, like
Okay.
dozens, if not 100+ hours into each one of these. And people are buying them for a lot of money, and so he's able to continue to do that. And he deserves all the success. I mean,
Yeah.
his talent is unbelievable. And then, so there's that side of it, just the cleanliness
Yeah.
of the cuts and how detailed the cuts are, right? That I'm always working on and improving on. But there's another side of it that they're doing, which is they add other things such as resin. They do all this resin work with very precise, such as like on the Blastoise, the dew drops, they'll make
Oh,
those and drop the resin and cure it so it's like perfectly on the card.
oh
And they'll cut
man.
out all the
Okay.
shapes and use materials to shape them from the back so they have like natural arch to the bodies and stuff. Like, so they're doing all
Nice.
kinds of stuff
That
that's
stuff.
that's next level. Yeah,
I didn't even consider that like the time on task is going to differ based on like the goal of it or based on the complexity of it, obviously, but also from a business side of it, you want to also be able to have like do consistent production or whatever. But to be able to
exactly.
spend the time on it, to be able to dedicate the time to it, to getting better and all that, it's just going to take time. But it is obviously something that like you can't just you can't just listen to a book on how to do it. You have to physically do it, and it
It's
takes
all
all your
practice.
attention. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say earlier. You were talking about like how to get there. There is no way other than just continuing and continuing and continuing. I mean, I can try different blades and stuff or whatever, but in the
mm-hmm.
end, it's just all practice and just spending hundreds and hundreds of hours doing it, and that's what they've done. And I mean, I've spent hundreds of hours. They've spent thousands of hours.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So, okay, somebody wants to get into this. What would you tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself if you were to start over with, or you're just starting deck cutting? What
Right.
advice would you give your first month in self?
Well, but besides the general coach talk of patience and practice, I would
For
say
sure.
realistically, tools. When I started out,
Okay.
I had this really old little thin cutting mat that was like, sitting in the office from years ago, and I was hunched over on a stool. And now I've got this whole desk here and a really nice self-healing cutting mat. That's important, like a nice one that's really actually self-healing, not just one of those ones on Amazon that's advertised as self-healing, but spend like 20, $30 to get a nice cutting mat
Okay.
and and an ergonomic handle. I mean, this one was expensive, but this company, Ergo Kiwi, they make a plastic one that's only like $20. So I would say that that getting the right tools are the most important thing. Having something like a stylus so you can close up cuts if you need them to be stable. Having an ample supply of blades and not being afraid to change them. I probably change the blade more than 2 or 3 times per card if it's a complicated card. Per card.
Interesting.
And
Wow.
so I'm just like
Okay.
tossing blades all day long. Yeah, so
I didn't even
changing the
consider
blades
that.
often.
Yeah.
So tools, yeah, tools. Having the nice, a good handle, changing the blade often, a nice mat, and a desk to work at. That would be the most important things, you know? Because otherwise, it's like I said, it's going to be generic stuff like patience and practice
Of
and
course, yeah.
just keep going, you know? And that stuff's important, but that applies to every new craft. Is understanding you're not going to be great at first, you know?
Right.
So
And
yeah,
understanding you got to create the environment to succeed in that kind of a craft too. And something
very
that
true.
does take so much time, um, and that you enjoy it, I feel like it is very undervalued. That like, well, I'll just kind of use what I got or whatever. But like, really investing in something that's going to make the job itself of doing it, and like all those detailed tasks, make it as easy as possible on yourself
Absolutely. Yeah,
versus
I mean, I
just kind of
spend besides my bed, I probably spend the most time of my life here at the desk. You know, so it
right.
should be enjoyable. And and none of these tools are that expensive either. I wouldn't say go out and buy, you know, a $200 handle or anything, but I found
Yeah.
this desk on Craigslist for free and you can get the mat
Nice,
for
dude.
$20. You know, these things can make a huge difference for
That's
sure.
cool. Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
is. It is good though. That's like you can get into something and not spend, because there are hobbies out there where it's like to get into this, you're gonna have to drop, $1,000 on something, and it is like,
Exactly.
but you can get to, you can have like kind of a good time doing it and have a level of success of learning on it with those right tools. But 4 razors a deck or a card sometimes.
Yeah, and for like the dabs where there's a lot of because these blades, like I said, they're not meant to cut through cardstock. They're meant to cut
So
through
itchy.
paper. So it's so
Wow.
much more pressure that they get bent. And I could make the blade last longer, but I'm such a perfectionist with the cuts that I want that perfect cut like every time. So as soon as the tip gets a little bent, I'm like, next, next, next. I do save them and use them for other stuff like cutting the border cards, cutting the tuck cases. I can use them
Okay.
still. They don't just get tossed in the garbage, but I'm
Okay.
pretty much just like changing the blade every few minutes. Yeah.
Okay, I mean that would be a pretty good tip then for somebody that's getting into it. I'd say like, oh, you expect to go through blades
Yeah,
relatively quick. Like if you want
buy
to
a
learn.
500 pack. Yeah.
Okay, dude, that's
If,
nuts.
if you're going to really get into it, yeah.
That's crazy. Okay, what's a 500 pack of blades cost? I didn't even know you can
They're
buy that.
yeah, they buy on Amazon. I buy two 500 packs at a time. I'm almost done with this one. They wind I don't know, remember the exact, but they wind up at 20 cents a piece. So
Okay.
divide 500 by 20 cents. I don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
probably like 200 some 200 some. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, a couple
whatever
hundred
it is.
bucks though. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's dude, I didn't even think about like that aspect. When
I
I
know it's
see
like a
it,
parking meter. I'm like 25 cents, 20 cents, 20 cents, 20 cents, just adding for time. Like, you know what I mean? Sorry, I totally cut
That's
you
a
off. What were you saying?
perfect analogy though, dude. That, and the fact that you can kind of still reuse them for other things as well, so it's not just trashing them. That's okay.
Yeah.
What kinds of cards would you? Is it something that you just have to try different ones, or like what is there like an easier style to practice on when getting started?
Oh, right, right. What types of designs? I thought you meant like what type of stock. I'm like, I don't know if there's that big of a difference between cutting different stocks,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
no, definitely, definitely. Um, don't go for things that have curved, wavy lines. Like one that I have still yet to challenge myself with is the Psychonauts deck. This is probably one of the most challenging designs you could possibly choose to cut with all these waves and intricate stuff that would be
Love
so
those.
difficult. Circles are incredibly difficult, but
Okay,
here, this was my second ever one. Very geometric. That's going to be a lot easier to cut. Things with
got it.
bold lines and like squares and rectangles and geometry, as opposed to like wavy lines and small things like that, are going to be like this is another one I did early on. Actually, two kind of interpretations of a similar design.
And you're
Um,
holding up for was that the killer bees from Illusion or what? Yeah, what were you just holding
yeah,
up?
yeah, they're killer bees combined with some knockoff red bee deck. Like it's not
Okay,
actually a bee deck, but it was like
okay,
the theme with the killer bees and the imitation bees,
that's what
kind
I
of
was
like
wondering. Okay,
invasion. Yeah.
yeah, dude, invasion.
So yeah, that's what I would say is go for things like that that are going to be easier. Those are going to make it easier to
So
cut.
more geometric. Okay, that makes sense then. So when you're cutting an orbit deck, is that big circle a challenge?
It is this circle, funnily enough, is big enough where
Okay.
it's bordering back into not so challenging again because
Okay.
it's not that big. I would say like these type of circles on the tally ho,
Tally
like
ho for
that
sure. Yeah.
size circle is the most difficult type of thing to cut. In fact, I ordered some punch tools, and sometimes I get lucky and the circle is the exact size, and I just use the punch tool because they're so difficult to get right. A circle this size is is challenging, but it's like I said, it's so big that it's not as tough as something small like that. Yeah,
Okay, so with the or I'm just looking. I've got some V8s in front of me, but I was thinking
me
about the
too.
circle and the. I'm seeing like all the of like the little rocks and stars and things like that. So on like the Orbit V8, would is this a deck that you would be able to like cut, but the what would you do with all the rocks, all the space rocks and things?
Right. With this deck, with the space rocks, they're too small. If I
Okay.
cut that out and made it a layer, you wouldn't even really be able to like see
Okay.
in.
That's
So
what I was wondering.
I would either just leave that as the background card so that the background is the space rocks, or I
Mm.
would get rid of that whole part, which is the circle is floating, so I'd have to have something connecting it to the edge. But I might get rid of all that part with the space rocks entirely and put
Mm.
something else behind it. And then that would be, this would be the
Nice.
front card. That's probably what I would do with this one. Yeah.
That's cool, man. It's fun hearing like the way you would kind of like work through something like that. Cause I'm looking at it
Right.
and I was like, dude, I don't even know where I'd start with something like that. But
Right,
that's
right. Yeah.
okay.
If someone wanted me to do an orbit cut with like the not crazy expensive orbit decks, I might choose the V8 or the V8 parallel. Hold on, let's pull up the parallel. Let's brainstorm a little design test right now. If
Yeah.
we were to do a V8 slash V8 parallel cut, the parallel has kind of just like, all right, the center, that's dope. That wavy center, I love that.
Yes.
So I would definitely replace the center with that. But I like the white, so we could just do like the orange edges. You know what I'm saying?
Good
We could even
call.
do the orange edges with the
Mm.
orange circle, something like that.
That
And
would be
then
cool.
I wish I had the Christmas deck because in my mind, this is what comes to just like thinking through the decks in my head. The Christmas deck that has all the trees and like I think it's a sleigh flying right in the
Yes.
edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
The
that
2021
one
one. Yep.
that one would be awesome as the background for this. You'd have like the outer space and then the Christmas and the sleigh, the theme, right? Like that's what I would do with it is the Christmas
I,
one, actually. Yeah, that's what I would do with it for sure. So
dude,
I'd get
that.
rid of the rocks, go with the Christmas background, and there's a lot more room for cutting on that Christmas background as
Yeah.
well. You got the trees, you got this, going on, so you could add some depth. Yeah.
I feel like I just watched a artist come up with a move in person. That was I was following you that whole time too. I was like, oh yeah, the holiday 20 like the Christmas 2021 one. That it's got like the little sleigh on it.
Mhm.
That's I love that about orbit decks. The way that like when you fan them, you get a piece of art, and then
Right, right.
like that. Yeah, that. Anyways, I can go
He's
on
the
on that
best
tangent.
he's the best at making like border bricks for sure. The orbits have the best border bricks, hands down.
They do.
Sleigh, yeah, the rocket ship on
That's
the whatever they are,
yep. V
fours or
fours.
six.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Yep. I have those. I mean, yeah, the way he ties in. You know what I was just getting tripped up on was border bricks, and I was like, that's the perfect word for that. I didn't even think of that. I didn't know there was a word for that, and I
Oh
love that
yeah,
style.
that part of the design is the border break. Yeah. I didn't
That's
know that you did that. All right, we taught Tyler a new term today on deck
yeah, man.
design, border
Yeah, I was like,
break.
oh, that's
Yeah,
a great way to describe what you just said, or that
right.
one part.
That
I see
little
that in
bit in the
different
corner.
decks.
Right. Some of
That's
them
cool.
have it, some of them don't. Yeah, I mean this one doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I love that. That's there's definitely gonna have to be a part two because I definitely would love to keep talking about different decks. I want to watch. I just want to like put decks up in front of you and be like, what would you do with this one and then this one? And like I feel
That'd be
like that
fun.
that would just be a whole episode itself, man. That sounds
Totally.
because watching how you would just your energy just like you were uplifting, like
Oh, thanks, dude.
you could like see the if you're listening, go watch. But you could see him like light up when he's like walking through this process, and that's like the kind of energy that I'm gonna wrap
Thank
this
you, man.
up. That's the kind of energy you kind of see at CardistryCon, and like a lot of other people kind of like that. They're all just kind of like doing something that they enjoy doing, but also like naturally really good at it. And like you see just like how it comes through. But then watching it, and then you're like, oh yeah, that would be cool. Oh, that would be cool. And then you're just adding all those layers. And then eventually you're just like you melt my mind with a mirror. You'll throw in a mirror and I'll be like, whoa, that takes a whole different direction.
Right. Someone needs to incorporate infinity mirrors into cardistry. That's the next step. Somehow. I
That's,
don't know how, but
uh, I hope
take
somebody
take
hears
some of
this and
these,
does
take
that.
some of these and do some cardistry with it. I don't know. It's a little heavy,
It'd be
but
trippy.
some idea.
That,
Yeah, I mean, okay, Lotus in hand, you guys are always doing crazy new technology with your cards. Here's your challenge. Infinity mirror, somehow this spin into playing card. That's what I want to see next
challenge.
year. Yeah, Lotus in hand challenge.
Oh,
Uh,
that's funny. They are pretty innovative with what they do.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're always the ones pushing weird, new, cool technology, color changing cards and
Yep.
UV, all that
That's what
cool
I
stuff.
thought.
Like, I
Yep.
love it.
The color changing ones were they the normal cards at CardistryCon?
Hmm.
Were they
Yeah,
okay? That's what. Yeah, when I saw that they it did that, and then that they have like that thermal deck.
the
It
thermals. Yeah,
Yeah, dude. When you hold down on it, like if you're not aware of that deck, it's like like where you touch it, it changes color. So Lotus in Hand, for those of you that don't know, does that kind of unique
next
stuff with.
tangent here.
Yeah, dude. There is like card technology, and it is fascinating that you brought it up that way because there are these there's these the fact that that kind of a thing exists is beyond just the design of a card is what's mind blowing to me. Side tangent again. Yeah.
Okay, UV light in here. It's not going to color change. Oh, well.
Oh, is that the
Cool.
normal cards? Yep.
Yeah, but
It's
it's not working because you need
Yeah,
actual
CardistryCon watching
sunlight.
everybody get those, and then they would watch it kind of in the sunlight. It would That was so cool.
That's
Um,
magical in itself. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, it's such a fun way to like even the way that they're looking at cards is a completely different way too. It is cool seeing how many different ways you can just people see a deck of cards and it can mean something completely different to other people. It might just be euchre to some people, or it might be like I'm going to combine these two decks, cut them together, throw in a mirror and some lights, and we got a sweet like and a whole different tuck case. Yeah, why not? Like, and then somebody's like,
Right.
oh, I
Different
can,
decades.
and then people are like, oh yeah, I could probably do some kind of crazy packet cut with that. Yeah, that part's side tangent. Lotus hand, of course, thermal cards would throw me off. Um, okay, you've got a Patreon. Ways people can support you. What can you just launched it recently, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
What's that about?
Just so, I mean, I have a number of people who have told me that they would want to support me, but I am realistic about the fact that buying an expensive art piece is just not realistic for a lot of people, especially today. So, I set up just a $3 tier, $5 tier, and a $10 tier, and the $10 one you get a free cut at the end of the year. So you're basically just buying a cut. And I'm also doing giveaways, like right away, I'm doing a Fontaine decoder. So like rare decks, good decks. I'm also going to be giving away cuts. So trying to make it so that you're not just donating money to me, but that you're actually getting some stuff in return. That's my goal with the Patreon is, that you don't have to that it without investing a bunch of money into a expensive art piece, you're able
Mm-hmm.
to still take part in something and get something for it and support me at the same time. So I just launched it. There's already like some of these cuts that I showed today are exclusive to the Patreon. They're not on my
Nice.
Instagram and they won't be for a long time. And another thing I'm hoping to do on the Patreon is live cutting sessions. So I'll do like
Oh,
a
smart.
four-part, like start to finish, up close live cutting session where I'll talk about my thought process and what I'm doing as well. So that'll be
Nice. That'll be cool, man. Yeah, that's especially somebody that is getting into it. I feel like would really benefit from something like that too. Or like obviously just watching. I've watched your lives too. Like I'm thinking about like if I wanted to learn how to do it too, how valuable of a resource that would be. of somebody that's kind of showing you like, hey, here's what I'm thinking with this, and here's how I'm going to do this, and kind of going through it. That'd be really valuable, just beyond the entertainment value of like, oh, that's a cool idea. Oh, that's cool. Being able to see stuff before it comes out. Always, I mean, that's always
I think
pretty sweet.
you have value in multiple ways. That's definitely one of them. Yeah, I didn't even really considered that. Like, but I also do have a tutorial post up on my pinned on my Instagram, and I'm always available for if anybody wants to reach out anytime for questions or advice or whatever the case may be, or just to talk about your favorite decks. You can always hit me up over on the Instagram, 3DecksDesigns.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
And
sweet.
then if you are interested in seeing my work and just window shopping or even potentially
Yeah.
buying one, you can go over to xdex.com on the brands page. I'm right at the top because I got a number at the beginning of my name, so I'm lucky. So right there at the top, 3Dex Designs, and then my Etsy is linked on my Instagram and everywhere, so you can check out my cuts. And I'm constantly posting more to the Etsy, and there'll be more actually coming to XDex as well before too
Oh,
long. So we'll
nice.
see about that. Yeah, I've been talking with Jay,
Sweet.
the owner, about starting to produce even more. So
Nice, dude.
always doing it.
That's shows there's
Yeah,
demand. That's cool,
right.
man. Uh, Thanks for geeking out about cards with me, dude.
I had a great
I
time.
appreciate your time, man. What is the final question? What is the deck or decks that you want to cut? What's on your bucket list of cuts?
Right. Uh, I'll give a realistic one because of course I would love to cut a Fontaine 500 slash Fontaine Red crossover cut, but
Ooh, that'd be sick,
realistically, I actually was talking to someone the other day. I don't know, it might happen, but
dude.
realistically, right now, the one that I want to find a good deal on to cut is the Magic Con 2014 deck.
Okay.
That one is such a cool deck. We can throw up a picture of it. It's got all these really subtle colored like geometric patterns that are kind of random, but it would be a really beautiful cut, and I think it would be hype. I think people would cop that.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's such a quintessential deck, and but it's tough to find. That's the thing is I don't want to spend
Mm-hmm.
$40 or $50 on a deck I'm going to cut because the amount if you do $40-$50 on the deck plus 8+ hours making it, what would I have to sell that for to not be at slave wages? No one would be able to afford it. So I want to keep these, my like well under $100 for people. Like, and that's so I gotta find someone that's willing to. If anyone out there has a Magic Con 2014 you want to toss my way,
Right. Yeah,
donate for the
dude.
cause. Yep,
Or
definitely.
Fontaine Future, the 500s or the OG Reds.
That's
That's
a little bit bigger of an ask,
yeah.
but
What?
yeah.
Okay. So okay, man. I see. I could keep going. Okay. Final question. What would you do with? Have you thought about what you do with the 500 in the Fontaine Red?
Yeah, definitely. I have. Yeah,
Okay.
I would cut out because the whole words that say there are only 500 of this deck are kind of attached to the Fs. So
Yeah.
I would be able to basically float those whole words, similar to what I did with the word Heath, right? But it
Oh
would say
yeah.
there are
Yep.
only 500 of this deck, and then you'd have the Fs, and the reds would kind of would I would just do like a background of the reds and then just the red F in front because what else can you do with just solid red color, right?
Of
But I
course.
would use the tuck case from the reds because that would really be
That's
the
cool. That the
the
red
other
and blue
piece.
would play perfect together too.
Exactly. Those are just two decks I think would be great to put together.
Of
So, and I've
course.
also got both of them on my shelf. So that's another. Yeah.
Dude, yes. Okay, so oh man. For those of you that are unaware of the two decks that we're talking about, the retail for those two decks roughly, if you could just go buy one off eBay, is
Uh,
350 for the 500s maybe, or 300 for the 500s,
yeah, three-ish. Yeah,
and then like
and
6
then
or 7 or 8
yep,
depending on the season.
yep.
So just that alone, so you're looking at like basically 800-900 bucks for that set,
Yeah,
and then you get to cut it, and then you're like, okay.
right. Exactly. At that point, the cut is nothing. You've just spent $1,000 on decks, but it would be
Oh, I love
amazing.
that. That's cool, man. I hope that we can refer to this conversation someday in the future when you are cutting those decks. That's going to be,
Indeed,
it'll
that
happen.
would be cool. That'd
I
be
love it,
cool.
dude. All right, man. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate you. And once again, where can everybody find you?
You can find me Instagram at 3DecksDesigns and Patreon the same thing, 3DecksDesigns, and come and hit me up anytime. And yeah, that's pretty much where you'll find me.